Hi, everyone. This is Dawn Richard, also known as The Awakening with Dawn, and this is the Wake Up to Real Love podcast, where we share stories of struggles and triumphs in love, sex, and relationships, along with expert advice to create more conscious connections. I am super honored today to have my guest, Kelli Nielsen, also known as the Grief Guru. Welcome, Kelli.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, Kelli has a really difficult story and a really inspiring story. And she did not grow up with aspirations of becoming the grief guru, but after experiencing divorce, bankruptcy, and cancer twice, she felt like she'd learned a thing or two about overcoming adversity. And she lost her mom to suicide in 2017. And a year and a half later, her 20-year-old son died from an accidental drug overdose. Kelli, grief, of course, came in like a flood, but she learned so much, and she will share a lot of her story. But now she teaches others to use her developed grief relief process to navigate whatever hard season they're facing. She teaches others to move forward on purpose, in purpose, and design the life they truly love. Kelli, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. It's my honor and pleasure.
When you hear somebody else say it, do you think, I can't believe that was my life? That this is my life?
Sometimes it's so woven into my DNA though, that like I'm very familiar and comfortable with my story and with my experience. And without sounding arrogant, like I earned, you know what I mean? Like I earned those stripes. Like
Yeah.
I have engaged in hand-to-hand combat with grief. Like I am intimately acquainted with heartache and grief and loss. And so, yeah, when somebody reads my story, it's not a surreal out of body thing because I have the scars to show for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Very personal.
Yeah. So you had a lot of struggles growing up, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And because we had talked before, and you said your mom and dad had a conflicted relationship, and so there were things just within you that you had to learn how to sort of deal with the adversity of that situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, mostly addiction. I mean, addiction is a common theme in all of these situations. And my father was and is an addict, and his addiction, and he actually he passed out behind the wheel when I was like 5 years old and had a really
Wow.
bad car accident that shattered the bottom four discs in his back. So
Wow.
really began one medical complication after another after another. So that was like a cloud kind of over our family. And then his alcoholism, he actually sobered up, quote unquote, when I was in 5th grade, but it just transitioned to pain meds and doctor prescribed and sanctioned pain meds. I mean, rightfully so, because he was in a significant amount of pain in his back, but it just changed, the addiction, and that's interesting and ironic that even though he hasn't had alcohol in a long time, I'd have to do the math since I was in 5th grade, a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But the addiction didn't go away. It just transitioned
Right.
into a different type of addiction, and all the effects relationally, the effects on their marriage was incredibly codependent, incredibly toxic, incredibly just unhealthy in every kind of way. And then that compounded with his kind of worsening health over the years took a real drastic toll on our entire family, their marriage, but really tragically, fatally, my mom's mental health and well-being. She just was his main caregiver. And because they were so incredibly codependent, she didn't have a great support system outside of their relationship. And in fact, the very last conversation I had with her, I said, Mom, what are we going to do to get you some help? What are we going to do to make sure support you need? And are you going to go to a counselor? Are you going to go to a Christian women's group? What are we going to do for you?
Had she ever gone to Al-Anon?
We all did a little bit. We sobered up, quote unquote. When I was in 5th grade, we went through the family portion of what he went through or whatever. And
Uh-huh.
She read a lot of books. She really liked to read. She was just she didn't have a lot of friends. She didn't have a big social circle. You know, they didn't go to church and that kind of thing. And then with his declining health, it really limited their ability to even do things. So yeah, she didn't have a lot of outside sources of support. It really was me and my sister, you know, and as I got older and she and I got closer, I was kind of her main support. And so that's an interesting thing that we don't talk about either, is that I didn't even realize the full weight of I was carrying
Right.
of their toxic relationship and her mental health, and me trying to like hold her up because he's holding him, you know. I didn't realize until after she was gone, like what a toll that was taking on me. Emotionally and even physically, the energy it was taking to be in the mix of that really unhealthy relationship.
Uh-huh. So did you have any clue that she had suicidal thoughts?
No, and this is the other hard part why grief was really hard for me with my mom, is because I can't even sit here and tell you conclusively right now today that 100% that she killed herself.
Mm.
We put it at 85 to 90%, but there just are a whole lot of suspicious, for lack of a better word, details that don't line up. For example, the bottle of pills they found next to her body was not what she had overdosed on. It was not the drug that was in her system.
Oh,
That makes sense.
yeah. Wow.
She was in a room, and my dad said he wasn't concerned for her safety, yet he broke the door open and had checked on her several times throughout the night. And his description to us was, I checked on her and she had a pulse and she was warm. And then I came back and checked on her again and she had a pulse and she was warm. He did that and repeated that several times through the night, and then said he came at 5 a.m. and she had passed away. Now, if you didn't know anything was wrong, if you had no suspicion to worry that why would you
be doing that?
Yeah. So the police ruled it a suicide. I have no physical evidence, and my dad hasn't, and I can't even. So my point in all of that is, like, the short answer is no. Like I said, I spoke to her the day before. I literally spoke to her the day before, asked her about getting support for herself. She said she was open to getting support. She wanted to check out a women's Christian group.
Mm-hmm.
I had a date that night, and she said, oh, I can't wait to hear about it. Call me tomorrow and let me know what happened. And that's the last conversation I ever had with my mom. I got a call at 6 the next morning from my dad letting me know that he had found her passed away next to a bottle of pills.
And how did your grief overtake you in that time?
Yeah. Well, in that moment, first of all, I think that are surprising is how physical it is,
Mm-hmm.
and how your brain just really stops working. I mean, I had never experienced shock like that before.
Uh-huh.
February 1st in Minnesota, and it was 6 a.m. and I remember going into my closet to try to put on clothes, because in my head I was going to go drive over there, and I couldn't do it. Like, I couldn't put pants on, I couldn't put shoes on. Like, the mechanics of my brain just didn't work. When I finally did drive over to their house, it took me 45 minutes. I kept turning down the wrong streets. It
was like you were in a fog.
It was really out of body and in a fog. And so the way I describe it is that grief came in like a flood, and it had its way with me. I think for a lot of reasons, because it was so shocking, because there were so many unanswered questions, because I had no skills for dealing with grief, because nobody had taught me how to do this.
Right.
And I was in a leadership role at an organization. I had to resign. I took a different role I was in no shape to lead anybody.
Right.
Eat. I couldn't sleep. The physicalness of it, I literally remember laying in my bed and feeling like my bed was going to swallow me whole. Like, heaviness of it. The words aren't doing it justice. But I just remember nobody told me about how physically you feel like you have the flu, you can't concentrate, you're exhausted all the time, but you sleep. Like, it's just awful. It's like zombie land, you just kind of go through the motions. And I lived in that state for several months. I did not find relief or help in anyone. And I am, and was even then, a person of faith. And I just could not find relief anywhere. I really couldn't. And
No, like supportive friends, no groups at church, or no, well, you said you didn't.
it was all so tragic. It was like, it was too much for the, the joke that we had was, my episode was like an episode of Dateline, like nobody could believe that she was gone and the circumstances. And then there were all these questions around my dad, and we were waiting for the autopsy, and like, oh, and then he started dating someone like, a month or two after she died. I mean, it was just this,
wow.
It was real. And so all my friends, didn't know what to say. It was kind of too big for them. And this isn't why I'm so passionate about what I do too, is because we as a society, as a culture, we don't do grief well.
No, we don't.
How to do it ourselves. We don't know how to be there for people who are grieving. We don't know how to be friends. We don't know how to be support. Like everyone.
We don't know how to talk about it. It's one of those things that where like, it's almost like with these racial issues that are still ongoing. I mean, they've been going on for centuries. But it's like, I feel uncomfortable, so I'm just not going to say anything.
Right. People either don't say things because you've struck something deep in them that they don't want to face, and so they don't want to get used to it, or they're afraid to say the wrong thing and offend you or hurt your feelings, so they say nothing.
And
that
which is worse, right?
It compounds the pain, because I found myself so incredibly alone. This big, awful thing had happened in my life, and none of my friends could relate, and they didn't know what to say. And my sister was going through her own grief process and whatever. I felt incredibly alone in it. I couldn't find tools to help me. And so I went to a suicide support group, which ended up being awful. Honestly, I went there, and I was, first of all, so encouraged because everyone around the table knew exactly what I was going through. And that was comforting to be around, just get it, right? But everyone in that room were having the same experience I was having. They were just barely going through the motions. They were still in the zombie state that I was in. The only difference is, for me, it was like 6 weeks, 8 weeks after it had happened. For them, it was 6, 8 months, or even there were people in there who their loved one had committed suicide years ago.
Wow.
And still were looking just like me. And that, I remember leaving being petrified. Like, oh my gosh, is this what my life is just going to be now?
Right.
Like, I'm just going to be sad for the rest of my life. Like, I'm just going to go through the motions and miss my mom terribly. And, like I began to believe the lie that that it was hopeless, that that's just what life was going to be. And I lived.
And why do you think that people get stuck?
Exactly that. Because they believe the lie that they can't get better, or that somehow them getting better means they didn't love the person they lost.
Mm-hmm.
All these lies and misconceptions about grief that are so pervasive in our society and culture. And like, how common is it to hear, oh, grief never ends. Right. Grief never ends, you just learn to live with it.
Right.
That's not true. But if you believe that, that is what you will experience.
Right.
So, and I did not realize I was believing a lie. I did not realize that I was putting a limit on my own self and like actually hindering my ability to heal by believing that, until thank God, I met a woman who was healed. And I saw an example with my own eyes in front of my own face of somebody who went through something worse than what I went through. And she was healed and whole and happy and had a positive outlook for the future. And I was like, oh, I mean, you hear about those light bulb moments. I literally think there was a light bulb over my head, because it was just like, if she can do it, I can do it. And I made the conscious choice right then and there that I would get better, that I would figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how long it took, no matter how far and wide, if she did it, I was going to do it. And I decided for myself that that's what I was going to do. And that's the biggest first step that most people don't do. They just let their feelings of sadness kind of perpetuate and dictate that they're always going to be sad. They don't decide that that healing's possible for them, and that they're going to do the work to get through to the other side of healing. And so they just stay in this out to sea sort of experience.
Yeah, but if somebody, while you're talking about it, I was just thinking, if you say somebody who's just lost somebody,
Yeah.
no, oh my gosh, this is so awful, I'm so sorry for you, but you know there's life on the other side, you wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
want to hear that. You wouldn't
Right.
want to hear that right away. So like, what's this balance of allowing people to feel the grief and the deep sadness and the anger, you know, I mean, all because the anger, the confusion, the fog, all of that stuff, it's like those stages of grief that people have to go through. And
Yeah.
it's like, you can't deny your feelings.
Right. You have to process through them. So I agree and disagree, because first of all, I don't agree with the whole 5 stages of grief thing. That has not been my experience. And I certainly don't think they go in a linear pattern.
No, it's not. No, it's not linear. No, no.
And I also, well, I agree that you can't be like, oh, well, they died, I'm so sorry, but you need to just get over it. That's not what I'm saying. But it is really important. I feel like the sooner you can understand that it's possible that you can get to the other side, the better. I'm not saying to put a prescribed time limit on it, but one of the most powerful things, so when my son died, thankfully I had a great pastor that I was connected to, and she had lost her husband 15 years prior to cancer. And she shared with me her story, and she said, Kelli, for her, it took her 18 months. She said, this is going to be incredibly hard. You're going to have to contend for your healing. You're going to have to be, protective of your environment. You've been through a trauma. You're going to have to treat yourself as though you've been through a trauma. But she's like, I can pinpoint the day and time where I knew I was completely healed. And for her, it was 18 months. And just her telling me that, and so this is just the type of person I am. I was like, if it's 18 months for her, it's going to be faster for me. Because
Are you a little competitive, Kelli?
no, it's not competitive, but it's like, that's how we are in human nature. They thought the 4-minute mile was impossible until somebody,
Right.
and you could do it. And so, the fact that I saw that the woman in the first place, Immaculate, who had, survived and healed, I was like, if she can do it, I can do it. And now here I had another testimony of somebody who said, I got completely healed. And for me, my process took 18 months. And I took that to say, okay, like, then I'm going to lean in with everything I have. I'm going to do the hard work. I'm going to process the emotions. I'm going to just, cooperate with this process, and believing that it's going to be faster than 18 months. And it was significantly faster. And that's when and why I was like, this needs to be shared. People need to learn this. These are skills that can be learned. These are muscles that can be developed. There are things that you can do that can accelerate the healing. And there are things that you can do that can hinder or even stop your healing process. And nobody talks about that.
Right.
With every other thing, we understand we have to participate with it. But when it comes to grief, we just lay back and let it happen to us and wait for it to be over. That is not how any other process works. So
but you know what, Kelli, I think it relates to us being able to process our emotions, period.
right.
Because I'm thinking about the people who stay stuck. They probably are still in a sense of denial, or what if, or, shoulda, coulda, woulda. I mean, all of those things where we keep ourselves stuck back there, instead of saying, okay, what do I need to do to move myself forward? Right. Because I mean, this is the biggest part of why I started this podcast, is because I know people don't know how to honor and examine their own emotional well-being and welfare, because because so many of us are taught to suppress your emotions. Don't cry, don't yell, don't play, it's just like we're kept in these little boxes.
Yeah.
And we don't allow ourselves to feel the fullness of what's really going on inside of our bodies. And so that's why I think the work that you're doing, because you're not saying don't do the work. I mean, when you were talking about doing the work, I want I want you to talk about what is the work to get
Yeah.
through this process. What is the work that you had to do?
Yeah. Well, so the 5-step process that I developed and work with people on, the first step is establishing your framework. And that is really the work of it. Deciding for yourself what you believe and what you want. And those two things, if you did nothing else, if you really sat and unpacked, what do I believe about this? And give yourself room to decide if the beliefs that you're operating from are based in truth or based in lies, or if they're serving you or hurting you. Because a practical example of that is I began to believe with my mom that I wasn't going to recover. Like this was just my life. I believed that, and that was hindering me. And so that had to be revealed and exposed to me that that was a lie and that's the truth that I could partner with and be accelerated in my healing. Right. So that's a process to like look at your beliefs around this and be open enough and willing to let someone lovingly show you if there's some lies hidden in there that are keeping you stuck.
Well, and don't you think also maybe one of the beliefs, because we talked about this last week when you and I talked, was that if I find some joy in life, if I start feeling some happiness, that in a sense is dishonoring the person that I lost.
That's a huge one. That's a huge one. And same with especially parents who've lost kids. You can believe the lie that it's your fault, or that you're carrying some responsibility for that. And you could be hanging on to anger, unresolved anger at the person who died, anger at yourself, anger at God. Those are all. And so that goes into the second part of the framework, which is really deciding, what do you want? What do you want? Like, even then, what do you want? And I learned the first go round with my mom about there's a lot of traps hidden in the what do you want question, right? Because if you decide that you want justice, or you want answers, or you want sympathy, or you want, there's a handful of things that you can want, but it won't necessarily bring you to a place of peace and restoration of joy. Mm-hmm. And so we look at those things honestly, and it's everybody's own journey. You can want answers, and it's not even wrong to want answers. Our minds are built to connect the dots. Like our minds are the need to make sense of things.
Right.
But you can decide when your pursuit of answers is robbing you of peace and joy. Like after the conclusion I had to come to with my mom, I exhausted all the things that I could exhaust to find out any answer I could find out. And I was at the end of the information that was available to me. So I could either continue and try to find answers that weren't available to me and let it rob me of peace and joy, or, lay down that need or that entitlement for answers. Because what I tell people is you can make answers your goal, and you could get the answers or never get the answers, but I know people who get the answers and they still don't have peace. Mm-hmm. So be careful if getting the answers is the thing that you're reaching for. But if you decide that peace and restoration of joy is your aim, then you line everything else up to that end, and you learn to remove and eliminate anything that isn't in alignment with that restoration of peace and joy. But all these other things, and we talk a lot about unforgiveness, because if you're carrying unforgiveness, that is going to definitely, you will not move beyond that. So you really have to work through that anger stuff, or, are you mad at are you blaming yourself? And I did all of it. When my mom died, I was really angry with God, and I had to wrestle through that and deal with it. I was really incredibly angry with my dad. I was angry with the police, who just saw a 62-year-old woman in a bottle of pills and just called it a suicide and didn't ask any questions. I was angry at the medical community. My dad had been in the psych ward right before this happened. They were holding him against they were trying to hold him against his will. And he raised a holy fit and threatened to sue, and they let him go. And 4 days later, my mom was dead.
Wow.
To sue the hospital system. And the tricky part about anger is it feels so productive, right? When you have sorrow and it's so sad and heavy, anger felt like an improvement. I'm like, oh, at least I'm up. At least I'm doing things. Like this feels good. This feels productive. but it can be a trap, you know, if anger is where you land and you never move beyond that. So for me, I finally got to the end of myself where I had to count the cost and realize what was the cost going to be, and did I have it to pay emotionally, financially, what was the cost going to, because I was like this close to going to the media, you know, with this story about my dad in the hospital and everything that happened. But I realized like I didn't have the resources to fight that fight. And I was being asked to fight that fight. And I just made the decision that for me, getting back to peace and joy was more important than these other things. And so then I made that my aim. And that, all that stuff that I just described is not for the faint of heart. Like that is gnarly, hard, heavy stuff. And that is step one of a 5-step process. So
you're like step one, I can't even get past step one.
But step one is the like, everything else is about protecting and reinforcing step one. But step one is the one that most people don't do and they skip over. And they just inherit their beliefs from what their family has told them or what society has told them or whatever. And they don't take the time to analyze for themselves, do the inventory, and make the conscious choice about what they believe and what they want. And just own the journey. You know, it's so easy for us to play victim and like this awful thing happened to me, so now I can never be better because this awful thing happened to me. Instead of saying, I tell my clients all the time, trauma is not your fault, but healing is your responsibility.
Yeah, I love that. Can you repeat that, please?
Trauma is not your fault, but healing is your responsibility.
Yeah.
You cannot control what happens to you, but you are responsible for how you move forward from it. And I don't care who you are. There are people around you that love you and that are depending on you and need you to be healthy and whole and living your best life. So if you can't even find the energy or gumption to do it for yourself, do it for the other people that are still here that love you and need you to be better. And nothing makes me more sad than to see parents who have multiple kids and they lose a child and they just give up. They just curl up.
Stop living.
They stop living and they're just existing. And it's like they're so grieved over the child they lost that they're losing. And then now their kids have to deal with losing a sibling. And now their parents are basically, you know, not around or available. It's the biggest tragedy because it multiplies, it compounds the impact of the tragedy.
So now when your son died, did you find yourself struggling with that? Because you also have a daughter.
Yeah. And my daughter is the reason that I'm so passionate about this and teaching parents, because my daughter said to me, and this will stay with me this will stay with me for the rest of my life. The very first words my daughter said to me when we found out my son had passed away was, "You're not going anywhere, are you, Mom?" Her first thought at 12 years old was that I was not going to be able to manage this, that I wasn't going to be able to handle the weight of this, and that I was going to take my own life. Mm. And what 12-year-old should have to think that way, you know? And that was the very first, the first words I heard from anyone after Quentin died was my other living child sharing her scared heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so maybe that, you know, lit a fire even more so on me that like, okay, like, and I said, I just kept saying, no, God, no, like, it's too much, God, it's too much. And she said, Mom, God will never give you more than you can handle. 12 years old, this girl said. And I said, I just wish God would stop thinking so highly of me.
Right. I don't want to be stronger. I'm feeling really, really weak right now.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know who you think I am, God, but like, you got the wrong one. But I mean, it'll stay with me forever. And it helps to give me purpose and fire and fuel that, like, you know, I don't have a choice. I don't have a choice. Like, I didn't ask for this. It seems more than I can bear, but I have to bear it. And I have to believe that I have what it takes to bear it. And that's the other thing, like a little bit farther down the road is like when your worst fear happens to you, when the thing that you're most afraid of in life and it happens to you and you're still somehow alive and even standing, it sort of gives you this like invincible thing, you know? I just was like, you took my mom and my son within 2 years of each other. Like, what else can, you know what I mean? Like, it just
Yeah.
puts in perspective, like,
Yeah.
what else possibly happened?
Yeah.
You know, people cannot, you can't make me have a bad day. You can't do it. You cannot do it. Like,
Well, but that's the thing. That's the thing, Kelly, that, you know, when you're talking about, you didn't have it, you know, you were saying, I don't have a choice. I have to do this. I have to show up. I have to be there for my daughter. But everybody has these same choices when they're put in these situations. And
right.
so, you know, I mean, this is one of my questions to, you know, God, is why do some people make one kind of choice that helps propel them to restoration and peace, and another person makes another choice that keeps them stuck?
Yeah. I think a lot of it has to do with examples. Who, you know, like the reason I was able to make that choice in that moment is because thankfully I had the example of Immaculate, you know, not less than a year prior, and I had learned these things. So I knew that it was possible. I knew that, you know, and that's why I'm so passionate about this, because unfortunately most people nobody's told them that it's possible. Nobody's told them that you can recover from this, and you actually have a responsibility to recover from this. And
Do you want to just mention Immaculate's story, just so people have
yeah. Yeah, so Immaculate survived the Rwandan genocide, and she was actually hid away in a bathroom with 8 other women, a small bathroom, 8 women for 90 days. And
how many?
90.
90.
3 months hid away in a bathroom, like emaciated, like just was a pastor in a different village that hid these women, and even his own family didn't know they were in there because he couldn't even, I mean, people were turning on people and exposing, trying to find these, they were trying to wipe out an entire people group. Or they killed nearly 1 million people. And then they were broadcasting it over the radio. And so she literally heard over the radio every person she'd ever known, her entire family being massacred in a village nearby.
Awful.
And I heard her speak and share her horrific tale of, you know, enduring that and surviving that.
Resilience.
But more, the part that got me was her healing journey afterwards, how she walked through this journey of healing and forgiveness. And I mean, just think about the trauma of every day thinking people are coming to kill you, and every day, you know, like,
and every single person that you love is lost.
Yeah. And then you come out and nothing, like virtually no one that you know is alive anymore. They've all been killed. They've all been just wiped out, your entire people group. And she walked through such a journey of healing and forgiveness that she actually went and met the gentleman who killed her family in prison, and
wow.
forgave him face to face, you know? So
how?
I mean, she leaves the rest of us without excuses. She leaves the rest of us without excuses. So I don't care if you're listening to this today, I don't care what you're facing. It is possible. You can do it. And, you know, we're so quick to give sympathy when people are going through a tough time, but what people really need is encouragement, because it takes courage. It takes courage to face grief. It takes courage to overcome tremendous loss. Anyone can say, oh, I'm so sorry for you. And that's
but your pity doesn't help them heal.
It does not help them heal. Like, you know, what they need is encouragement that they can do it, and then help to actually do it. If you want to be, you know, don't tell someone you're sorry for their loss. Do something to help them. You know?
What? Okay. So let me ask you, because I mean, when you were talking about that, that's what I was thinking. How can I help you the most right now? If you're my friend and you're grieving, and I say, I'm so sorry, you know, for your loss. I feel so much compassion for you. How can I help? What kind of support do you need from me?
Yeah. And so I think it depends on your proximity and relationship. So what I really want to encourage is, if you're a very close friend, if you're someone very close, I'm going to ask you to volunteer to be that point person. And I coach the people that are working with me to find a buddy or an advocate, someone who's going to help them navigate and coordinate people who want to help, funeral details or paperwork, all this stuff. It's crazy to me that it's like planning a wedding, planning a funeral is, except for you're doing it with not a lot of mental, like you
Right.
firing on all cylinders. So if a grieving person can have enough, mental clarity to find someone, but if you're close to someone, just volunteer yourself. Say, I will coordinate help. I will, and communicate with them about what are okay boundaries and not okay boundaries. Clean their house, do their laundry, buy them groceries, and
bring them food.
Bring them food, and please don't just bring them casseroles and cheese and dairy and heavy stuff. Like, bring them healthy food, bring them things that are going to help support their body, nurture their body in a healthy way. Because that's another, when you go through grief, neurologically speaking, and your hormones go so crazy. And then if you add alcohol and ice cream or just unhealthy stuff, it feels good in the moment, but you're undermining the whole process because you're just perpetuating all that stuff. So as much as they can, check in with them to make sure, ask them, are you sleeping? Are you drinking enough water? Have you eaten today? Like, be that.
Are you drinking too much alcohol?
Yeah. Are you drinking too much alcohol? Another great thing, again, if you're close and it's appropriate, is make sure that don't let them isolate. Make sure they're talking to at least one person a day. They're having some kind of conversation. Offer to go and just say, I will come and just sit with you. Like, just be with people in their grief. They don't need you. And I just want to release everyone from the burden or expectation to say the right thing. Can I tell you, there's nothing that you are going to say that is going to fix it for this person. You are not going to magically come up with the right string of words that somehow makes it okay for them. So just be with them in their time of grief. Like,
do you think that people worry that they'll say something to make it worse?
Yes, and people will. So just don't intentionally or obviously try to say something hurtful, but I guarantee you, well-intentioned people say the most, because you're ignorant until you go through it. It's like having a baby, and until you've had kids, you think you know the right thing to say, and you think,
I'll give you all the right parenting advice. I have no idea.
Exactly. It's so exactly like that. And so I just want to free people from this responsibility of saying the right thing or saying the wrong thing. Say what's on your heart, understand. And I teach people, literally, it's a lesson in one of my courses, is the dumb things people say and how to handle it, because no, they just don't know. And
can you give that to the people that are trying to support the people that are grieving, please?
Yes.
What dumb things not to say?
I'll give you a couple that have been said to me. Do not say they're in a better place. I know my mom and my son are in a better place. My son struggled with a drug addiction, and I know he's not in pain. He's good. I'm not worried about him. It's me that is hurting now. The fact that he's there does not, it doesn't do anything. So, and a lot of people say that. Don't say that. Don't say, this was one of the worst ones, because I have a daughter, Piper. I literally had one lady say to me, well, at least you have another
child.
I have an only child, so I would be really devastated if I lost my child. As if they're like a pair of shoes or something, and you just have an extra in the back. Don't say that. Please don't say that. I'm trying to think of some other ones. If it makes you uncomfortable, just own that it makes you uncomfortable, but don't minimize. I remember literally it was 1 month after my son passed away, and I was back at work, and it was the 1 month anniversary. It was a tough. And I was sitting there for lunch, and one of my coworkers said, how's your day? And I said, you know what, today's a really tough day. It's 1 month, since my son died. And she said, oh, but other than that, how's your day?
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me?
I wish I was. So I just made a mental note, and this is what I teach people too, know who is safe to share your feelings with and who isn't,
But that is a great example of how people feel so uncomfortable in themselves.
Right.
As opposed to saying, oh my gosh, Kelly, even you just saying that makes me feel uncomfortable because I feel badly and I don't know the right thing to say to you.
Yeah. Or to even say like, I can't even imagine.
I can't imagine what you're going through right now.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what you're going through. Please share with me so that I can, try to understand and be a sense of, some support and extending you some compassion right now.
So for friends and family, I'm just circling back because I really think like if you have a group of friends, here's another thing you can do. Nominate one person to be the spokesperson. As much as you can minimize having to repeat things a million times, if you have a group of girlfriends and say, just nominate one person to communicate and be the representative and offer the help and do the stuff or whatever, because you get this inundated with all this love and support that's like overwhelming the first couple of weeks. And then it rise up. Oh, here's another thing you can do. Literally put a reminder in your phone.
Once a month.
3 months down the road, 6 months down the road, because I promise you, everyone else has moved on with your life, but that person is still really grieving the loss. And it will mean much if you circle back and say, hey, it's been 6 months. How are you doing?
Yeah.
Because nobody's asking anymore. And that.
I remember I have a friend who lost her husband to cancer, and it was about 3 years for her. I mean, she has a son, and I remember, just every little while, it was like, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? How are you feeling? And just so that you know that other people are thinking about you.
Mm-hmm. And if you can, and we were chatting about this before, like put the actual dates, in your phone, because I promise you for the first year, at least every date, because it's, especially the first year, it's the first XYZ. It's the first, whatever.
The first Mother's Day, the first birthday, the first anniversary, the first, Christmas, the first whatever, all these holidays that you used to share with the person that you loved who's no longer with you.
And again, you don't have to fix it for them. You don't even have to do a special gesture. It just would mean so much to say like, hey, I know today's whatever, I'm thinking about you, just like that would go a long way. But I think people, they don't do that because the other thing too is they're like, oh, well, if they're having a good day, I don't want to bring it up and remind them. Can I tell you that it's not like they forget that so-and-so died.
Right.
Like, not gonna like mess up their delusional like good day that they forgot about the loved one that they lost. So
no, and I mean, and even even if you are having a good day, and we talked about this last week, it's that sense of it can't be either or. It's not you're happy or you're sad. You've moved on or you're still grieving. It's like it's like helping people recognize that you can hold both and in the same container.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of why people have a hard time.
Yeah. Yeah, because most people live in an either or experience and they don't want to interject. I mean, it's pretty, I can't think of a day that goes by, especially with my son, and I call them little pockets of sadness, and it might last 10 seconds, it might last 10 minutes, it might be triggered by a song or a smell or a food or a picture of him. Like, he's still very much with me. And I also have, my daughter and I actually, we just the other week, we sat on the couch and thought of like his favorite songs, and we just played on songs that we know that he loved. Just laughed and remembered good times with him. And so not every day when I think of him is necessarily sadness, but more often than not it is. But I also have amazing moments in my day as well, and I do awesome things in my day. It's just part of the fabric of my story now.
Can you also share what you told me last week about, this time would be when your son would be graduating from college?
Yeah. So a lot of his friends are graduating from college, and that's another thing. Like, it just, Facebook memories, I love and hate Facebook memories because it brings, so now just this past week, Facebook memories 4 years ago was him graduating from high school, and so that's what's coming up in the feed. But his friends are graduating from college, and I was seeing, their families posting pictures, and I was so thrilled for them and so sad at the same time. I'm not seeing my son graduate from college, and I wanted to speak to it, but then I caught myself because I'm like, oh, I don't want to dampen, the mood. I don't want to be the wet blanket. I don't want to be whatever. And then I'm like, no, like, we can do better. We can do better. Like, they are completely entitled, and they should own their joyous celebratory moment. And I celebrate completely. And I should be able to own my heartache that I don't get to experience that. And we can, as friends, share in each other's experience without it stealing from one another. Like, my sadness should not take away from their joy, and they should not be afraid to express their joy out of fear that it's going to compound my sadness. Like,
Right.
we can have both of those things. We can communicate and share both of those things, and they're not in competition with one another.
No.
One doesn't take from the other, or it doesn't have to. Actually, a lot of people let it, but the point, it doesn't have to.
Well, and even I imagine for the, the friends whose kids are graduating, if first of all, I would imagine that they would be thinking about, oh, I wish your son was still here, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wish Quentin was still here. I wish he was partaking in all of this stuff too. We really miss him. Like,
And
I'm having this happy experience, and I still miss him.
And I wish they would say that. One of my son's friends' mom, so she posted a picture of her son, and I liked it or whatever on Facebook. And then when I finally did write my post, she's like, I'm so glad you said this. I noticed my heart sank when I saw that you liked his picture, and I thought of you. But it's like, she didn't reach out and say anything to me.
Right.
Why can't we just have these conversations?
Right. Why can't we just be real?
Yeah, like, there's plenty of room at the table for both, for both experiences and expressions and all that kind of stuff. So
I feel like it's almost a protective mechanism. It's like, well, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to hurt you even more. But in the same way, by not saying something is not really honoring you either.
I know. My son is dead. Like, there's nothing that you can say that's gonna hurt it more. Like, there's no more that you can do as a relationship.
Yeah.
Like, are there ignorant things that people say? Yes. Like, and should you not, as much as it depends on you, not blatantly or try to say something, insensitive or hurtful. But this whole, like, see, this is what politically correctness has done to us. Like, we're so afraid, we're so, like, trying to be politically correct, that we have stopped being real or trying to relate or ask questions or get to know someone's experience. We're just trying to stay at a distance and not offend them. And that is a relationship.
No.
Like, understandings and offense and all that happens in a relationship, but that's part of, like, the beauty of a relationship. Your stuff gets intermingled, and
it's messy.
And that's part of just the way that it is. And so if we stop being willing to be misunderstood or to say the wrong thing or have the wrong thing said to us, then we're going to just live, and that's where we're going. We're just going to live in little silos, So, and grief is a big one. Grief is a big, like, taboo subject that people are just awkward around. And
well, I think grief, and I just said this before we started this podcast, I think it's it's just your feelings. People don't express their feelings. And so, I think that this because there's so much that we've been dealing with, it really, this time in our lives is a really beautiful opportunity to start getting real.
Yeah.
To start being real, to start expressing what's really going on, and to start being curious. I'm being curious about me, and I also want to be curious about you, because all of us want to feel connected. All of us want to feel like our feelings matter.
Yeah.
And our life matters. So, how do we reach out to each other to create that sense of intimacy and feelings of value and belonging?
Well, and that's the opportunity that tragedy brings. And it's really hard to, it seems almost offensive to say that, but that's the truth. When tragedy comes, it's a great opportunity to realign yourself and recalibrate yourself and move forward in a different way. And as a nation, that's the opportunity that sits before us. Tragedy has struck our nation. Now, how do we want to move forward? And all the same principles apply. If you want to stay stuck in the past, if you want to stay stuck in unforgiveness, if you want, you need someone to blame. Like if that's your goal and that's your end, then you can pursue that. But the point is, we collectively as a nation, what do we believe and what do we want? If we're clear about those two things, if we can get united, even if we can just get united on what we want.
I was going to say, because people have all sorts of different beliefs. You're never going to get people to agree on beliefs.
But as it relates to race relations and whatever, but yeah, let's just stay with what we want. Like, then the path for getting there becomes a lot more easy to define. But as long as it's muddled, as long as we can't have unity around how to move forward, or even that we should move forward, like, it's going to be incredibly difficult and people are going to stay stuck, Well,
and I also think that goes back to acceptance.
Yeah.
That we're all different and we're all in different stages and places, and we all are different, experiencing different emotions, at the same time. And so how do we learn to accept each other? Because for me, I feel like if you said everybody wants world peace, would people say, nah, I don't want that? I don't know, maybe some would, but I would think that most people would want world peace, restoration, world peace, people being able to live with joy and in joy, in communion, in joy. And, I think your whole focus on how do I want to move forward in restoration and peace, that it's that acceptance, and then also leaving all that stuff behind and saying, what can we create ahead?
And intentionality, like that's the other, it doesn't happen naturally or on its own. Like,
right.
So once you create this framework, then it's all about protecting the framework and looking at everything in your life. And is it in alignment with your framework or not? I'm talking TV, music, the people you surround yourself with, the books you're reading, the food you're putting in your body. You now have to evaluate everything to say, is this helping me with my framework, or is this actually not helping my framework, or is it incongruent with my framework? And most people don't do that. We're not that disciplined with our friend groups, our surroundings, all that kind of stuff. And so learning to do that and to have accountability to really make sure you do that is a huge piece of it too.
I was going to say that means people have to actually live consciously.
Right.
And a lot of people, it's easier to put blinders on and pretend like all that stuff outside is not going on. I'm just living in my own little bubble world. And that's a choice,
It's absolutely a choice. And you're accountable and responsible for the outcomes of that choice. Like, I'm not going to force you to make the choice to do the hard work to deal with it. But then you don't get to come to me 3 or 6 months from now and say, I'm just as sad today as I was the day it happened. Like, you haven't chosen to deal through it. Like, and I think I mentioned this to you, like crutches are for support, but physical therapy is the thing that gets you back in the game.
Right.
I am the physical therapy. And I recognize there's a place for crutches and support, and it's different for everybody. So maybe you need just crutches and support for a month or 3 months or 6 months. I don't know, only you know. But the point is, when you're ready, when you've decided that you want to get back in the game, then I'm your girl. I will help you get back in the game. And I even argue or contend that you're going to go back in the game stronger, more self-aware, having built up all these skill sets that you probably didn't have before. You're going to go back in the game a better version of yourself than you came out of the game. But
Right.
decided that you want to get back in the game. Like,
Right. And we talked about last week, you know, when we were talking about when you stay stuck, you know, if you were to stay stuck, would that be honoring your mom? Would that be honoring Quentin?
right.
You know, would they want to see you being stuck and sad and, you know, just hanging on to your grief and hanging on to just the sadness and despair? Or would they want you to feel love and joy and, you know, peace?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Like by actually
Honoring thing you
living.
can do.
Yeah, like
Most
living
honoring thing
your,
you can
yeah,
do for
exactly,
the person who passed away
is to live,
cherish the life that you have and
cherish.
make the most of it, and like get back to being healthy and do amazing things. That's the best that you can live. If someone has made an impression on you, whatever role they were in your life, and they're gone, the best thing you can do is go live the rest of your life in an exemplary fashion, because the way you live after their death speaks about the mark they made during their life.
Mm,
Made a good mark on you, if they had a good influence on you, the best way you can honor them is to go live an amazing life, because it speaks to that, you know.
you are one wise woman, Kelly.
Well, this is hard-earned wisdom, let me tell you.
I know it is. I know it is.
But I'm just passionate about it. I'm just very passionate about it. And it breaks my heart when I see people who've gone through such horrendous, significant loss, and then they give, you know, they lose,
Give up.
they lose even more because nobody's told them or helped them to realize that they don't have to live the rest of their life or years and years under this cloak of grief and sadness and whatever. And so I will wake up as many people as I can. You know, I will help and show and be an example and create a whole bunch of other little examples, so that, you know, one day it'll be like recovering from a surgery. And that's the analogy.
Yeah.
Like, it's, you had surgery. Yep. You had surgery. Yep. It was super painful. Yep. You may or may not have asked for it or planned on it or any of that kind of stuff. You have to take care of yourself. You have to heal yourself and get back to life. Like, that's
And now I got to go to physical therapy to rebuild my strength.
exactly. And to your point too, like, I'm not going to tell you how soon you need to get into physical therapy, but there is proof that the sooner you start, the quicker the process is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's an individual thing, but I don't think there's such a thing as too soon.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as the shock wears off and you start to have your mental faculties, you can start engaging in the process of, okay, what do I believe about this? What do I want moving forward? And how do I begin building the stepping stones to move forward with intentionality? Like, that's really all it is. And
Mm-hmm.
you're never too soon for intentionality.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing, you know, that what you're doing right now is you're taking the most difficult part of grief and you're helping others deal with it, right? So you're taking your greatest heartache and suffering and turning it into a blessing for so many other people.
And that is actually, that's step 5 of our process, is finding a purpose for your pain.
Yeah.
And because if you think it's just some random act that happened to you, it's hard to move through it. But when you recognize that whether you asked for it or not, whether you saw it coming or not, it is meant to make you and others around you better. And so if you can unpack the ways that you're stronger and better or more empathetic or have more clarity, whatever that is for you, I help people figure that out for themselves. And or how can you use this to help people around you? That's where the magic happens, because when you go through trauma or tragedy, it uniquely qualifies you to speak into other people's lives that you wouldn't be able to, you know, otherwise. I can go talk to recovering addicts and they will listen to what I have to say because of what the price I've paid. So I have authority now that I wouldn't have had any other way.
Right.
I wish my son was here instead, but I absolutely am going to take advantage of the influence I have now to make a positive impact in his name. And what a privilege. I mean, as a mom, the fact that I get to go share my son with so many people
Mhm.
who get inspired to stick with recovery or enter into recovery or whatever because of his influence, like that's such a gift, like
That's really honoring his life.
yes. And that opportunities like that are before everyone. When you lose someone or you go through something, whether it's volunteering or if nothing else, once you get a little down the grief path, you are now uniquely qualified to hold the hand of somebody who's earlier in the process because
Right.
you only know it until you've gone through it. So now once you've gone through it, you can be a better friend for people going through it. You can be a listening ear. You won't say those silly things that are hurtful or ignorant or whatever. So like if you can't figure anything else out, those can be a purpose for your pain. And that's so helpful for us to move on to recognize that it's not purposeless, it's not in vain, it's not just this awful thing that caused destruction and didn't bring any good. Good can come out of it. And the more you meditate on that, the more you recognize that and meditate on that, the easier it's going to be for you to move on and have healing and wholeness. So
Yeah, it's like it's like the pain is, I forget what they say exactly, but it's something like, the pain is inevitable, but the suffering is optional.
That's good. That's good. That's just like somebody said, falling down is an accident, staying down is a choice.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's hard. And especially with grief, like people can get offended. I've had people, I know that not everybody, some people get offended at my message. The idea even that you can recover and live an amazing life after you lose a child is straight up offensive to some people. But that's okay. You can be offended and be sad,
Yeah, you can. It's your choice of what kind of life you want to live.
yeah.
And I think I said this to you last week. It's like when you experience somebody who died, right? Somebody that you cared for immensely, like the love that you have for them never goes away, right? You can never forget them. It never goes away. They'll always be right with you, but you have to figure out how to reintegrate and redefine your life without their physical presence.
Right.
And that's a choice.
Yeah.
So your steps to help people get up off the floor, go back to physical therapy, get themselves stronger, and then go out there and run the race again, or
Yep.
it's a beautiful thing, Kelli.
Well, I've come to believe that it's what I was put on this planet for. So it's what I'll be doing.
Yeah. You found your mission and your purpose.
It took two back-to-back traumas and tragedies to get me here, but like I almost wanted to say I wouldn't change a thing, but that's not true. I would rather have them here,
Yeah,
but
of course.
not here. I plan to, I'm not, it's not wasted on me. It won't be wasted on me. Like their losses, their being gone is not, will
their
not
deaths
be,
and your loss.
yeah.
Yeah. Not wasted. No, you're turning it and you're turning your darkness into a way to share and shed light for everybody else.
Yeah.
Which is a beautiful gift that you're giving the world. So thank you.
No, it's my pleasure.
So the last question that I want to ask you is, how do you define real love?
How do I define real love? Real love is a choice. Real love is selfless. It's loyal. It's long suffering. And it's the only form of truth that there actually is. Like it's the only true thing that exists.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, what I say is that the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one that you have with yourself. So this is all that loving and honoring your own emotions and your own journey and your own suffering, so that you turn it into these qualities of compassion and understanding and acceptance, so that you can go and create this beautiful life with all of the gifts that you were given.
Yeah.
And
You can't give away, you cannot give away what you don't
have.
So you have to start with yourself, because it's impossible. You can give anyone what you don't have. So if you don't have empathy or care for yourself, then you're not able to have it for anyone else. So
Yeah. So how can people get in touch with you and find out more about your work?
yeah, so I am the grief guru all around town. So the website is thegriefguru.com. And I do want to let people know, so I wrote a book and published a book called You're Not Crazy, You're Grieving, which the first half tells my story and the second half outlines this book. But I like to offer for people when I go on shows like this that they can get a free copy of the audiobook by going to imnotcrazyimgrieving.com. And you'll get the audiobook delivered to you. And I find, especially if people are grieving, audiobooks go so much better, right? Because our concentration is shot, and retaining is one of the things they struggle with. So you can check that out there. But otherwise, Facebook, Instagram, we have a YouTube channel. So we have little chats similar to this and about specific topics related to grief on the YouTube channel as well. So they can find me at any of those places.
Okay. And I'll make sure that I include that in the show notes too, so people can, we'll put the link up or whatever.
Yeah. And I think, I'm not sure when this one will air, but we're actually in the middle of launching our new community and membership. So people can, it's Grief Relief Nation. So it is people who are all committed. They're all doing the physical therapy together, because one thing that we know that accelerates healing is doing it in healthy community.
Yeah.
Who are going the same direction as you and can help hold you accountable, encourage you, support you. So that's Grief Relief Nation, and that's coming out shortly. Folks, it's kind of a hybrid of like online weekly lessons with practical, like what is it you can do this week to see some improvement and progress. And then, like I said as well, Facebook community that's just encouraging and supportive and all that kind of stuff. So I'm really excited about that, because it takes both, right? It takes the information, but it also takes community. So super thrilled about that as well.
Right. So we will, we'll launch this. I told you we'll launch this when you launch this, so that we can help spread the good news.
Cool.
And the hope and the peace and the love. Yeah. So listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation, or if it made you feel uncomfortable, but it gave you some insights and inspirations to show up differently, either for yourself or for somebody else that is grieving, then please subscribe to the Wake Up to Real Love podcast and share with your friends. Write reviews, recommendations, any suggestions if you want to hear more from Kelli, or more of any other particular topics, because I am also here to help people wake up to real love, sharing more peace and inspiration, and giving people hope to live an incredible life that I think we all are deserving and worthy of living. So you can find me at Dawn Richard at The Awakening with Dawn on Facebook and Instagram. And I'm getting ready to also launch my own gig. So show up on Facebook and Instagram. You can find out more about me and my work and helping people experience more real love in their life. So honored for you to join me here, Kelli, and to hear your story, and for you to share your story. And your work is really, really powerful and much, much needed in this world. So thank you so much for being here with me.
Yeah, my pleasure. And thank you for creating the space, right? Creating the space and finding all the people with all the stories and all the tools, so that people can live the way they were designed to live. That's what we were designed for, actually, is to live amazing, rich, full lives. So thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. So listeners, every day, wake up to more and more real love. You guys take care. We'll see you next time. Bye.